Hello, Brit. No, you're not Brit Lit. You're ninth grade lit. Hello, ninth grade lit. Let's get going with poem number 6, Casey at the Bat. So you should be listening to this on Tuesday, March 24th. Remember to make sure that you have tried explicating it on your own first. If you are in the regular ninth grade, if you're in advanced ninth grade, remember that you first have an assignment you have to do and upload to turn it in before you listen to me discuss this poem. So if you need to, pause that and go do that first. Okay, let's get going. This, of course, is about baseball. It's a very famous poem from a long time ago that was originally published in a newspaper, and it kind of has the feel to it of almost like listening to a sports announcer, announcing a game or something like that. So you almost have that feel to it there. It looked extremely rocky for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 2-4 with but an inning left to play. So when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a pallor wreathed the features of the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go, leaving there the rest, with that hope which springs eternal within the human breast. For they thought, if only Casey would get a whack at that, they'd put even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, and likewise so did Blake, and the former was a pudding, and the latter was a fake. So on that stricken multitude a deathlike silence sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. Okay? So the Mudville Nine is just the name of a local baseball team. If you've ever watched some of the older movies about baseball, like A League of Their Own or something like that, baseball's been called America's sport. It used to be really, really popular back in the early 1900s on up through even, I remember growing up in the 1970s and 1980s. There was the Macon Braves. I think they've got a local team again, but there were all these local teams all over that would play. And then, those were the minor leagues, and then you could make it to the major leagues, which would be like the Atlanta Braves or something like that. They were feeder programs. And so the Mudville Nine is obviously one of these smaller, feeder program kind of teams where the whole town turns out to see it because it's something fun to do. It's exciting. And so if you know a little bit about baseball, they're in the last inning, and the score is 2-4, and now they've got 2 outs because Cooney and Barrows both, it says, died at first, so they both got out at first. So the patrons of the game, the people watching the game, get really nervous at that point. They're like, oh, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to pull it out. A couple of people got up to leave, and we see this all the time, don't we, at sporting events? If people feel like they know what the outcome's going to be, they're like, well, I'm going to go on and, leave and get out of here before the traffic hits. But some of them stayed there with hope springing eternal, because you never know, do you, in a sports game? It's not over till it's over. And so the ones who stayed thought if only Casey would get a whack at that they'd put even money, because Casey is obviously the best hitter for the team. But the third stanza tells us that Flynn preceded Casey, and likewise so did Blake. So there's 2 guys at bat up before Casey. And if you're not familiar with baseball, before the game begins, you have to submit your batting order to the referees and umpires. And you can't change that batting order, which makes sense because, you don't, otherwise you just always put your best person up there whenever, but you have a certain order that it has to go in so that everybody gets a turn at bat. Of course, they have designated hitters and stuff like that. But anyway, so if Casey could get a hit at it, he's their best hitter, and they're like, maybe we would win. But you got Flynn and Blake coming before Casey, and neither one of them are really good at bat. So they all sit there, all of the crowd sits there in a death-like silence as they're watching, because there doesn't seem much chance that Casey's going to get to bat, because if either one of those guys strikes out, the game is over. That's their 3rd strike. Okay? But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and the much despised Blakey tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and they saw what had occurred, there was Blakey safe at second, and Flynn a hugging third. Then from the gladdened multitude went up a joyous yell. It rumbled in the mountain tops, it rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and rebounded on the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. So, the atmosphere is building, the tone of excitement and everything's building because none of them thought it would happen, but Flynn gets a single and Blakey gets a double. So what that means is Flynn hits the ball and manages to make it to first base, and then when Blakey comes to bat and hits, he makes it to second base, which advances Flynn around to the third base. Okay, so you got a man on second and a man on third, and now here comes Casey at bat. So with Casey being their best hitter, of course, what are they all going to be hoping for? A home run, right? Because then in that case, he's going to bring home that a home run by Casey would bring in Flynn and Blakey and Casey. Remember, they're currently down. The score is 2-4, but that would put them 5-4, and they'd win the game. So now excitement is really building really quickly throughout the stadium. Then, no, we already did that part. Okay, next stanza. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when, responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat, no stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then when the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye, a sneer curled Casey's lip. All right, so Casey's heading up to bat. He knows the crowd's going wild for him. He's a little bit cocky, isn't he? He got a little bit of confidence going there. Confidence is a good thing, but he might be taking it a little bit far. He's got a little bit of swagger and pride as he, goes up smiling to take his place at bat. He doffs his hat, which means he kind of tips his hat to the crowd. So he's playing it up to the crowd. And so he rubs his hands in the dirt and wipes them on his shirt. A lot of times you see people do that so that the bat won't slip in their hands. Or you used to. Now people pretty much use gloves. But anyway, everybody knows it's him. So they're all watching, and the pitcher, it says, is grinding the ball into his hip. And you know how you've seen pitchers do that when they kind of lean back to get ready to throw. And so as that happens, Casey's getting ready, and it says there's defiance in his eye and a sneer curling his lip. So very confident, just sneering at the pitcher, okay? And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman the ball unheeded sped. "That ain't my style," said Casey. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches black with people there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" shouted someone on the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. So, whenever the guy pitches the ball, the pitcher pitches the ball, and Casey just watches it go by. And basically just says, "That ain't my style." But it was a strike. You've got to, whenever the pitcher's pitching, as long as that ball comes through in the strike zone, you have to swing at it or it's going to be a strike. So why would Casey not swing at it? Well, obviously he's wanting to win the game for him, so he's wanting to get, a home run. He's wanting to really knock it out of the park so that he and the other two guys can all come in, because that'll win the game for him. So I imagine he's waiting on kind of the perfect pitch. You know what I mean? He's, I'm sure there's some that are much easier to hit out of the park than others. I would think that would be a fastball, would be the easiest to really knock out of the park just based on physics. But so that's what he's waiting on. That's why he's like, "That ain't my style." He knows it's a strike. It's just not what he wants. So, of course, the umpire calls a strike on him. So even though that was a strike, Casey knew it was a strike. He watches it go past. The crowd goes crazy, and they're like, "Kill the umpire." And we all see this. We see this, unfortunately, all the time with the lack of sportsmanship among fans, But Casey raises his hand to him like, I got this. It's okay. So he calms him down. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and echo answered, "Fraud." But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold, they saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let the ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip, his teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. All right, so Casey smiles at the crowd and stills them, calms them down and, keeps the game going. He signals to the pitcher to pitch another one. The pitcher pitches again. Casey ignores it again. That's still not what he wanted. So the umpire yells strike two. Well, of course, the fans are mad again, even though it's not the pitcher's fault. The pitcher's throwing strikes. Casey's the one watching them go past. But Casey looks at them scornfully, and they get quiet. They see his face grow stern and cold, and they know he's not going to let the ball go past again. Well, he can't. If he does again, it's strike three, and he's out, and he's definitely lost. So no matter what comes across this time, as long as it's in the strike zone, he's got to swing at it. So that's why it says the sneer is gone from his lip, his teeth are clenched in hate. So, now he's really concentrating, right? He pounds the plate with his bat. You've all seen batters do that. And the pitcher throws the ball, and the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. So he just swings the bat with so much force that it's like it shatters the air. And then look at what the poet does. Oh, somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. So, he did swing at it, but it was a swing and a miss. He 100% missed it. So that was strike three, and they lost the game. He's out. And so that's why the poet there switches it to talking about, there's probably lots of places where the sun is shining and bands are playing and people are happy and laughing and children are shouting. But not in Mudville. Not in Mudville at all. Because they were all so excited that Casey was coming up to bat and was going to win the game for them. And instead, he struck out. Okay? So, let's look at the poem and let's look at what we think some of the particular literary elements are that we would want to discuss. First of all, let's look at the meter. To determine meter, and I'm not going to make you go into the whole part of it where you have to know all the different types. We've talked about iambic pentameter, which is unstressed, stressed, and it's 5 metrical feet, so it's 10 syllables. But what I do want you to do whenever you're explicating a poem at this level is to at least look through and see what's the meter doing. You know what I mean? Because it can do a lot of different things. Like, remember we talked about the meter of Slam Dunk and Hook, where we said it almost mimicked the tempo of a basketball game, which was fascinating. The meter, there was a lot of meter change in this short little poem, Harlem or Dream Deferred, by Langston Hughes. So what's the meter doing with this poem? If you count it out, and y'all remember how to do that? You count the syllables. You may have learned to clap it. I usually tap on my fingers, but you won't be able to really see that. So, it looked extremely rocky for the Mudville 9 that day. So that's 14 syllables. And if you go through and spot check that throughout most of the poem, it's pretty much 14 syllables in all of it. Well, that tells us a couple of things. First of all, it's a very steady tempo, right? Your meter is very steady. It is iambic, so it's unstressed, stressed. It's not iambic pentameter, because it's not 5 metrical feet, it's 7 metrical feet. But the fact that it's that very steady tempo, what does that do? Why do you think the poet chose that? Okay, and meter a lot of times works in conjunction with rhyme. So let's look at what's going on with the rhyme scheme, okay? Look at the end rhyme here. You've got day, so we would assign that what? An A. Play, that rhymes, that would be an A. Same, B. Game, B. Rest, C. Breast, C. That, D. Bat, D. All right, you see the pattern here. It's a series of rhyming couplets. All right, so look at what the poet's done. You've got a very steady meter, 14 syllables per line, and you have a series of rhyming couplets all throughout. So when I was reading it aloud, how did it sound to you? What did that do for the poem? Any guesses? So basically, it's giving you that sort of almost sing-songy, upbeat tempo that keeps you sort of rollicking along at a really good pace, and it helps to build the excitement of the poem as you go along, because you're really rollicking along at a good pace. It almost forces you to read in an upbeat, sort of chipper tempo, so I think that's very deliberate that the poet chose to do that. So tone of this one, I think you would have to say would be one of building excitement, because it starts out in the beginning kind of morose and depressed. They think there's no shot, and then it looks like there is a shot, and then of course at the end he blows it. So you've kind of got the building excitement all throughout, and then that big letdown at the end. This is, of course, narrative poetry. It's telling a story. We have characters, we have development, so you do see that throughout. And then I think on this one you'd want to talk about the theme. Poems can have theme too, just like stories can. And so what would you say the theme would be to this one? Something kind of like pride goeth before a fall, right? Which is a common expression that we've all heard. Yeah, if you're too cocky, too overconfident and showboating a little bit, sometimes things aren't going to turn out very well for you, are they? I'm sure we've all seen that or experienced that. So, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Speaker of the poem, if you think about it, I said this at the beginning, doesn't it almost sound like someone is announcing the game? Again, if you've ever watched any of those older baseball movies, like if you and your family has not watched A League of Their Own, that's such a cute movie. Like that would be a good one. I haven't watched it in a long time. I hope there's nothing inappropriate. I know I watched it when I was your age with my family, so I don't think there would be. But it's a really good movie, and I always picture that because it's about the same time period as this poem. So yeah, you always have the announcers who are, announcing the ball, and they're almost personalities in and of themselves. And so I think you really see that here. The speaker sounds like a sports announcer to me. Okay, I just realized I'm talking the whole time and have not written any of this down. So remember, you've got the rhyming couplets throughout, and that is combined with the very steady meter, right? Because we said it's 14 syllables per line. We talked about the theme, right? How it would be pride goes before a fall. That's something that we've all heard throughout most of our life. We talked about the tone, how the excitement just kind of like builds and builds and builds, and then boom, there's the big letdown at the end. And then we talked about how this definitely would qualify as narrative poetry because it certainly tells a story. Okay, so I hope that helped you fill out your sheets. Hopefully this is still going well for you. Remember, keep answering all parts of Common Lit. I am going in and grading those. On some of them, if you've done particularly well with your written response or particularly poorly, I am commenting on that and sending those grades back out and releasing them, so you should be able to see that in Common Lit. So make sure you're giving it full effort, okay? Keep up the good work, y'all. Stay safe.